Good evening to you, Scratchy.
Blessed night, neighbor. Caroline, Sheffield, and Harry over there on the YouTube and all the viewers and everyone. Blessed night, everyone. What's up?
How are you doing?
I'm okay, neighbor.
Yeah. I don't know if you've been listening where you want to start, Scratch. 22
no,
minutes.
I just kind of chip in and I listen, but I'm here.
Yes.
Anything that's true already.
Oh, well, okay. All right. So, Mr. Damion Crawford, Scratch. Let's start with that. He's filing a writ, suing the government for suggesting that students have to be paying tuition in Jamaica. I thought Jamaica had a policy of tuition-free education, Scratchy.
Definitely, neighbor. Our government institutions, neighbor, from probably the primary level, neighbor, have a free policy. So, and we understand, neighbor. Oh, Mr. Crawford just try to muddy the water without putting things in context, neighbor. There are a lot of basic schools in Jamaica, neighbor, that are run by churches, neighbor.
Yes.
A lot of basic schools are run by private institutions, neighbor. So a lot of these institutions, neighbor, based on the arrangement or how they're set up, neighbor, as private entities, neighbor, the resources or the burden, neighbor, is placed on them. So they will have to fend for themselves, neighbor, in terms of their resources and stuff like that. And in the Early Childhood Commission, to be fair, there's a lot of those schools. So I don't know if it's a result of that Mr. Crawford is talking about making things free and stuff like that, because even though primary education is free, neighbor, prep school is primary, is a form of primary education as well. It's not free at the primary level. You have to pay a cost because that's private. So a lot of these basic schools, neighbor, that are privately run, neighbor. So it would be a better argument if Mr. Crawford had said that the government should try and best and see how best we can adapt as much as these private institutions and put them underneath the Ministry of Education formal system and call them government school instead of in some church, neighbor, with minimal or very, very limited amount of resources, neighbor, running these basic school, neighbor, and cannot fully run them.
Fantastic. Scratchy, what do you think about the writ itself? Do you think it's going to go anywhere? Because what Mr. Crawford is suing for actually already exists.
Yeah, but Mr. Crawford, neighbor, is someone, neighbor, who always suffer from verbal diarrhea, neighbor. It's a person, neighbor, who he came on, neighbor, and the spotlight, neighbor, as a very bright spark. Or he tricked us, neighbor, to believe that he was a very bright spark. We realized that it's a very dull spark. So Mr. Crawford, neighbor, is someone, neighbor, who goes around and behave like he's this educational wizard across the country, as if he's the brightest man in the country, neighbor. And when you look at Mr. Crawford right now and the position of the job that Mr. Crawford is tasked with doing right now, neighbor, it's a job, neighbor, that doesn't refer to any much qualification. It's all about when you have a certain level of popularity, because this not to throw cold water on anyone in education, neighbor. But Mr. Crawford, neighbor, is digging up education so much. He should have been in a job, neighbor, that requires more skills of his educational level that he studies and stuff like that, because I can tell you, neighbor, over Mr. Crawford's side, Mr. Crawford's supposed to have 40 subject, neighbor. And there's a man over there, it is alleged with one subject, and the man Crawford getting the same salary. So Mr. Crawford just need to understand, neighbor, and just stop coming in thing and trying to use these arguments, neighbor, to put himself here. See, neighbor, where the risers has basically pushed him aside, and he's trying to push himself, neighbor, to try to get some form of media attention and some form of marketing, neighbor, because he realized, neighbor, that he's becoming more irrelevant, neighbor, because of the risers, neighbor, putting him one side.
Okay, let's jump over to Harry over on YouTube. Hold on there for me, Scratchy. Good evening to you, Harry.
Good evening, neighbor.
How are you doing?
A little tired tonight, neighbor. A little tired, just coming from training. You know?
All of us. Harry, how do you see this writ filed by Crawford?
Neighbor, I think it's something to be it's a marketing stunt in terms of the rebranding for him to be relevant.
Yes.
To be honest, and that's something he's good at. You know, Scratchy said in terms of what he studied, he's good at marketing, Scratchy, and that's what he does very well. Now, the major thing with him is that everything he does right now is to fit the rebranding process that he's going through. And the issue with that is he's trying to do it at a moment when the People's National Party is having so much issues that he wants to be coming off as some form of savior for something. And education is just one such aspect. And you can critique and criticize education as much as you want, but it's no different from health. Anybody can sit on the sideline and criticize, but if you don't come with proper solutions going forward and alternative, then it's gimmickry, right? And he's sounded the trumpet a several weeks ago about this, so it's something that we saw coming. It's nothing surprising at all. But what he needs to understand is that due to the failure of his government for such a long time, um, give me a second, bro.
Not a
I'm
problem.
going to. I'm going.
Okay. Joshua.
Uh, Greetings, my brother, and greetings to Caroline and the rest of your listeners.
Great evening to you, Joshua. Let me hear you on this education writ filed by Crawford. He's suggesting that the constitutional rights of Jamaica, that the government is breaching those rights by the whole matter of charging tuition in pre-primary and primary schools.
Well, that first of all, that information is false. The government under Bruce Golding instituted what is known as tuition-free education, so that is incorrect. And the best I can describe it is like playing prawn and anchor. It's a gamble. You may win, you may never win, and it depends on which judge he stands before and what the views of the people is. So he may win a game or two, but the long term effect of it will be negative against him because whilst he may win in a court of law, if you have a judge that favors him, and in a court of law, I cannot see him winning because, as I said before, the government had already instituted tuition free education. So there is no right which is being breached. I heard Scratchy mention about the schools which are controlled by the churches. The government took some steps some years ago, not to while Faithful Williams was Minister of Education, to co-opt all of those schools that are run by the churches, those basic schools, into the formal education system. So people no longer have to pay for any form of education, right? So again, he cannot win in a decent court of law. And I think a strong message needs to be sent, even if there's a loss in the local courts, to take it as far as possible to silence him. The unfortunate thing about this is that the taxpayers are the one who pays for the legal fees of Damon Crawford and his bid for popularity, because this is all that it's about, his bid for leadership and popularity of the PNP. And I think something ought to be done. And not only did he do that, but he made some damning statements, um, which which um, which are also false. He spoke about there's a reduction um, in the education passes. I wonder what data Mr. Crawford is looking at, because he used some figures and he basically stated that the amount that sat the exam is less. And as a result of that, that is why the figures look so impressive. But if we should prorate it, one of the things that we used to talk about when I was at Guardian Life is a prorating. And also it's done in the banking sector, right? If you should prorate the figures, right, and scale it, right? Let's use a term which is more applicable, what persons would understand better. If you should scale those figures and even increase the numbers, the participating numbers, then obviously and using the same percentage, then it still would be greater, right? So Mr. Crawford is causing himself to look more and more like the idiot that he has been labeled as being. I'm not calling him an idiot. I'm saying that he has been labeled as being an idiot by others who know him better than I do, right? In addition to that, if you're going to place it squarely on the Minister of Education, because in this bid to try and make the Minister of Education looks bad, these are some of the things that he's doing. But in essence, he's making himself look bad because when the government, the Ministry of Education, came out with the Jamaica Teaching Council bill that would have held the teachers accountable for the lack of performance that we see in some schools, Damion Crawford, was one of those who voted against the Teaching Council bill. And the interesting thing is that this is the same teaching council bill that they wanted to implement under the People's National Party. So how do you support it when you're in power, but when you're out of power, you vote against it? It shows rife and rank hypocrisy on their part. In addition to that, he's also taking away the responsibility of the Jamaica Teachers Association because apart from being, instead of being a political arm of the People's National Party, as the teachers, the JTS has shown itself to be, what they should have been doing is holding teacher accountable and making the teaching profession more noble, as it was in the 60s and 70s. Instead, they've relegated themselves to just being an extension of a political party. In addition to that, you are also lowering the bar for teachers, and by extension, the very children that you claim to want to represent, you're shortchanging them. So, all in all, Mr. Crawford is doing himself a disservice, and it will explode in his face and go against him in the long run.
Thank you so much. Harry, were you completed? Did you complete?
I'm here, neighbor. So one of the major things Mr. Crawford has failed to identify, neighbor, was that the swing in terms of pre-primary education and so on, he has failed to identify and to speak on the fact that the birth of the ownership of these pre-primary schools, right, came
Yes.
as a result of the People's National Party not able to provide this vital service at that age under their tutelage, under their tenure.
Yes.
And investors, neighbor, and when I say investors, I'm trying to speak a little on it. The churches, because a lot of our schools were birthed out of the religion, right? And they saw this as an opportunity to help the state. You
Yes.
you then you then have private investors now who came with the money, who saw that there was a need. And everybody know that if you're a proper businessman and you see a need, you can make profit from it. And as such, those individuals, those entities stepped in and filled the gap due to the failure of the state for over a decade, neighbor, and pretty much even before that with the stop start issue. So they failed under their time to identify that this was a critical lineup to have in your country, because that is where education starts, neighbor. It starts from the home with the parents, then it matriculates into that pre-primary aspect, because parents have to go to work and so on. So they then get that secondary socialization, and they get it because of that. And you can't be suing the government because they are able to provide after so much time. You can't sue them for private sector people that have seen the opportunity and taken it up and provide the service. What he should be suing, neighbor, is the lack of ability, the lack of funding under his very own party when they were in power. So he should have gone and dig up Maxine Henry Wilson, everybody before them, to sue them to how they treat the generations before that, because they weren't ever equipped to do anything, right? And to see now that the current government is trying to step up and step in after being fiscally responsible for such a long time to get funding somewhere to try and adopt some of these institutions, neighbor, and to bring them on board to the state itself. He Crawford has no foot to stand on when it comes down to this, right? And he needs to understand that this isn't something you want to try and get a hype off. It's not a good branding um move, right? Because I can speak for his ability in terms of knowledge when it comes down to marketing and consumerism, neighbor, because he taught me those, or rather he gave us the access to the literature of it, right? But the truth about it is that you can't be going about it in that manner when everybody before you failed. So as you said, it's like trying to sue the or take the man to the court who's trying to fix the problem.
Yes.
And because you don't like the man who is fixing the problem,
Yeah.
you're
So
going to take him to court to try and show him up. But the truth behind it is that every single one under the People's National Party at the time failed the country,
yeah.
failed the future, fail the people. And
I think
that is
someone
what
should
he had.
to try and sue somebody for FinSAC. Protecting Jamaica, your comments on that?
Good evening, neighbor. Good evening, listeners. Harris, Cratchy, Joshua, those over there on YouTube. Good night. Welcome to Neighbors University. Neighbor, I like them conversation. Now, let me give you a background before I show you how Damion Crawford's case is going to crumble in the courts.
Yes.
If I'm the Attorney General representing background first. 1944, 1943, pick me on a tree, I go to school. Parchment paper, bird do out a tree, me know I use certain language. And the paper that they picked them even wrote on back then. And I am suspecting that them did I use feather and ink. There, by the time school done, bird do now stick with paper, you can't even see what them write. Buster, that's 1943. Alexander Bustamante became the first premier self-government after universal adult suffrage. And the first order of business for Buster was to build almost 200 schools, majority primary schools, basic and primary schools. Take the pick of them from under tree, put them in a comfortable environment.
344 schools.
Right. And give them book and half a pencil now. Now, continuing through that, Buster continued to build schools. Norman Manley came in 1955. He did not do much. He just continued from them. But one good thing that happened between Norman and Buster, two brothers and cousins at the same time, they had a social contract that was evident between them two. Because again, Buster having championed the development of Jamaica, Norman bought into the idea, realized that it only made sense that he continued having the situation being a relay. And then we came back to the 60s and we see one nether bungalow schools being built. Buster started again, but because of ill health, Shera continued because Donald Sangster dropped out. Siaga continued along with Shera, supporting as Minister of Finance in the later period of the term. We saw 1970s came about. Michael Manley attempted to just rename some institutions that were built by the Jamaica Labour Party. And then we saw Siaga came back in the 80s and he decided to expand on education and adding to the mix training, skills training. No.
Yes.
Why did I go there? I went there because it rings hollow when the People's National Party talk about education.
Yes.
And if you notice, people, listeners and panelists, if you notice, the PMP always come with a lot of bluster and loud mouthing when it comes on to education, because they know that if the conversation is to be had in a balanced way, they will be found wanting. Now, here is present day, and here is my representation of the government with this nonsense, illy-billy Tom and Jerry case that Damion Crawford.
You think it's a cartoon case?
A cartoon business.
In
2014, Ranitways locked down 18 schools. Why? Because there was not sufficient students. The student population was dwindling to fill out the school.
Yes, sir. I remember the one in Windward Road. I was working down in that area there, Tata. A big old school, so not even 50 picnic.
Okay. In 2024, the World Bank report on the birth rate of Jamaica said the birth rate dropped by 24%. So if there's not enough picnic, or Damion Crawford are represent writ to court, we say that you don't have enough school spaces. Where them the picnic that come from overnight? I go at them in breed up anyway.
Well,
Let me continue. Okay, yes. Let me try and keep this together.
Yes, man. What? Go ahead, sir.
If we are to consider this seriously, then we are going to have idiot neighbor. It is just an attempt by Damion Crawford to rebrand himself, as Harry said, and to reposition himself. But because the JLP government has a national reach and national influence, Because Mark Golden has already established in the seat of leadership.
Yes.
Damion Crawford has to appeal nationally.
Yeah, that is true.
So it's a national appeal for a party leadership race. That's what it is. There is no way any court can take Damion Crawford seriously when he mentions that the percentage of people graduating with subjects today are less than back then. When what used to happen back then is that a great considerable amount of children, school age in Jamaica, especially of tertiary, of secondary school age, used to just stay home.
Yes.
Because a lot of the parents could not afford even the cost sharing situation to have their children go
You're
to school.
quite right, sir.
So there was a small amount of students who were being screened. I know that to be a fact, to take the exams. And if you were screened and you couldn't even get 40%, the teachers, the school had a mandate from the government that you should not be able to sit the exams.
My God.
So when he uses numbers, I notice himself and Peter Bunting like to use numbers because everybody in Jamaica, they expect to be idiots. I tell you how the PMP operate. Everybody are idiot but them. Because what they do, they educate to the tertiary level a certain class and a certain amount. And them have them in their back pocket and front pocket. So everybody else a fool. And when they communicate now, them sound smart and them present some numbers. So you say, yeah man, him bright. And you just hug up what them say. But no Damion Crawford. Because the 20-year-old today also was coming of age and started secondary school between 2012 to 2016. What did you do? What was the preparation like? The 30-year-old today who barely make it, they came of age at secondary level under the People's National Party. So it cannot be that you come and twist and swing certain numbers and expect that 10 years of Andrew oldness has some significant negative influence when it is this government who is trying to improve the education system. It cannot work, Damion Crawford. And therefore, the court will decide that this case that you have brought has no basis. It has no legs to stand on. There is no evidence in these numbers you're trying to put forward in the parliament. Because I can assure you, neighbor and listeners, he cannot go to court with all these bull numbers that he's putting forward. Because it is just not, the maths is just not going to math. Explain to us what resources were in school when I was going to school. That so much so that teacher after dipping at a little peer fear by chalk for right from blackboard. What resources did you put in school? What resources did you put in school to stop students who could hardly complete the coursework from falling behind because there was no material, you couldn't have the field trips, you couldn't have the... Come on, man. What is Damion Crawford talking about? Why didn't he address, since he was using numbers, why didn't he address the fact that a great considerable amount of schools are privately run, church-run schools. Therefore, they operate off independent private budgets. Why didn't he address the fact that a lot of these schools came to life, as Joshua just said, under the People's National Party government? Why didn't he address the fact that the public system lost teachers to these private institutions under the People's National Party because the government could not afford to pay teachers? Now that Nigel Clark and the JLP has begun to remunerate the teachers properly, the private system have lost those teachers back to the public system. So any deficiencies that his research has found must be in the private system, because the private system really are better now to stay alive. How can you blame the government, therefore, when it is the JLP government who approach the private system and said to them, so listen to me, these basic schools that you have, we are going to support you to have at least one trained teacher in each of the schools, at least one, to evaluate the other teachers that you have who are CTVET trained or the other teacher training at the lower level, certificate level. At least one degree teacher, and we will pay that degree teacher. Why doesn't he speak about that? Those are improvements in the system. Why doesn't he talk about the basic school council? I don't remember its name. That they use now to evaluate these basic schools that are privately run or church run, to bring them up to standard so that they can get their certification from the Ministry of Education to operate on par with the public schools. Why doesn't he talk about that? No. His personal attempt to be leader of the People's National Party has clouded his judgment. Therefore, he come with some numbers flinging around. And I submit to the court tonight that this case must be thrown out because it lacks merit and it lacks foundation. There is no evidence to prove what he's presenting.
Fantastic, great.